Today we're going to be talking about Helldivers 2 in difficulty because of this comment here. Now the devs have brought this up before, but they clearly don't want to sacrifice performance for difficulty, in that if they just keep increasing the amount of enemies we have to fight, it will eventually hurt the performance of the game because there's just too many enemies on the screen. And I definitely agree with that take. We don't want to make the game choppy, we don't want to make it run bad, we don't want to go back to the days of bugs and problems where you got kicked out of the game and it crashed every 5 seconds. So we need to find a different way to make the game more difficult. The other issue they bring up in it is that most people play lower difficulties. It's easy to think when you're on level 10 difficulties all the time that, hey, everyone's playing on level 10 difficulties, but they have the stats and it shows, no, most people play lower difficulties. So if we play in difficulty 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, it's going to split the player base even more. So how do we make the game more difficult without affecting performance and without splitting the player base even more? Now, there are some easy solutions to this that are just absolute garbage, and they're kind of the tried and true method of making a game harder that we've seen in video games before, such as the tried and true, hey, we're going to increase everyone's health by 50%. But I think most gamers agree that that's not actual difficulty, that's just tedium, and we don't want to add more tedium. The other obvious solution is, oh, we just reduce the amount of stratagems you're allowed to bring, but we've had that before, and well, players hated it. When we could only bring 3 stratagems instead of 4, people actively avoided those missions because it just wasn't fun. And the third most obvious solution that they can't do is just make the stratagems less effective, because we've had the stratagems less effective, and even though I personally enjoyed the game more when that was the case, the overwhelming majority did not like feeling underpowered and like their stratagems weren't impactful, so we had to remove that and change the entire way of the game. So we can't just make enemies bullet sponges, we can't reduce the stratagems we bring, and we can't make the stratagems less powerful, so how do we increase the difficulty of the game? Now, I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring with a few suggestions here, and the number one suggestion is one that I've added before, but it's worth noting again, is that rather than adding a difficulty 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and splitting the player base, if they allowed us to have mission modifiers on any mission and make any mission we want a little bit more difficulty with modifiers, we would prevent splitting the player base, and it would add extra difficulty if people want the challenge there. And I really do think that's the solution here. So you have a base level 10, like what I'm doing right here. I beat this mission without dying a single time. We beat it pretty easily. I cleared half the map by myself. It's clear that there is the ability to clear the game without difficulty. So if we added some mission modifiers that were completely optional, we could definitely increase the difficulty without increasing the number of enemies. We finished this mission with about 15 minutes to spare. That means it took us around 20 to 30 minutes to do the full mission. So if they decrease the amount of time you had to complete a mission, I think that would definitely put the squeeze on Helldivers to be more efficient, to not die, and to clear things very fast. And I think that would be the extra pressure we need to increase the difficulty. This is an ICBM map. You get 45 minutes to complete it. So say you only had 20 minutes to complete the entire mission before you lost access to your stratagems. This would force people to either split up and clear the map in segments, which is harder, or it would force you to not do standing and fighting and really clear objectives quickly and efficiently, manage call-ins. I definitely think that having a tighter time on a lot of missions would increase the difficulty for a lot of people. I also think that if they made it mandatory to extract within a certain number of samples, that would definitely also increase the difficulty. I see a lot of players in higher level difficulties who don't care about samples because they don't need them. They will actively avoid going into certain bases because, well, why take the risk when there's no reward for me going in there? For example, on maps like this with the bots, you run up to a giant fortress and all you do is throw down a 380 barrage or a walking barrage and it'll clear most of the fortress, or you throw a laser in there and the entire fortress will be clear. You've cleared the event, but you didn't actually have to go into the fortress. There was no danger. So by forcing players to actually have to go in there and collect all the samples means that they actually have to clear it fully and correctly, which increases the chance that they're going to get hit by like the turret, the base defenses, the call-ins, and the other things. You combine that with a tighter time limit, and now you've got a much more difficult ability to actually clear and finish the game. So I think modifiers like that could definitely help, but I understand why that would not also be the best solution. especially since the vast majority of people seem to play the game by just jumping into like a quick play. You would have no way of knowing whether or not there are modifiers on the game you're joining, and if you join a game with modifiers you don't like, you're more likely to quit, and that'll just create a bad experience. So I get that they don't want to do that. They could give us another thing like the Predator strain. When the Predator strain came out, that definitely shook the game up. There were very, very battle-hardened pros who were getting absolutely decimated by the Predator strain. And by swapping out certain units with those more advanced units, it prevents you from having too many extra units on the screen, but still shakes up the gameplay. The problem is that difficulty only lasts for, a week until the players figure out how to best counter it, and then you're just back to absolutely stomping the level 10s. And the other problem with that, obviously, is that it takes a lot of time to develop new units. You have to reskin them, you have to make lore for them, you have to do a whole bunch. It's not something they can pump out every week, so it wouldn't be enough to actually add a permanent difficulty to the game. It would just cause a difficulty spike for the first week or two where they introduced it. People would figure it out and they'd be back to normal. So it's not a long-term solution, it just takes too long. What I do think could also work, but might be disliked by the community, because this is something I personally dislike, but I know other people do like this, is like a requisition slip mode. And this would be close to like Deep Rock Galactic, I think. I haven't played the game a whole bunch, but I do believe that this is how it works. Like, you have to mine a certain amount of money or get a certain amount of requisition slips in order to call in like your resupplies. And if we limited the amount of resupplies that someone could get, that would definitely force a lot more scavenging. It would be a lot more difficult for what am I going to do? How am I going to use my ammo? Am I going to do these engagements? It would definitely cause like those decisions. So having something like you drop with X amount of requisition slips and the map is littered with these special requisition slips and you have to go and get them and pick them up in order to call in resupplies or to call in your turrets or whatever would definitely make a much more difficult gameplay. The problem with that, of course, is how do you balance it? If you pick up a requisition slip, do only you get it? Because then you have a problem with someone just running around the map, hoarding all the requisition slips, and then they can call in everything and you can call in nothing because, well, you didn't pick up any slips. If you make it a team-based thing, how do you prevent one person from just spending all the requisition slips and trolling you? There's always going to be problems, right? No solution is going to be perfect, but just because we can't find a perfect solution doesn't mean we shouldn't try something or try and enhance the game in one way or another. But I do kind of like the idea of saying, okay, we're dropping with 10,000 requisition slips and a resupply costs 5,000 requisition slips and your epic cannon costs 3,000 requisition slips and summoning in that turret costs 5,000 requisition slips. So we need to be very careful about how we're spending our slips until we can go get more, and there is a limited number of them, so we have to be a little bit more careful with our gear. That, I think, would be a fun mode for some people. Again, I don't like the limitedness. I know that like when they had the old days of limited stratagems or longer call-ins or longer cooldowns, people really didn't like that, and I kind of feel this would be in the same vein of that, so I don't think a lot of people would like it, but I do know that there are people who like that like limited survival scavenging kind of mode, so I do think people would enjoy that, and it definitely would add a new element to the game. Would it be more difficult? I definitely think so. Would people play it? That I don't know. Another option they could do is something like in Ghost of Tsushima, they had that Kurosaki mode where it was one hit and you were out. And they could definitely make it so that one hit and you're out in Helldivers, but I also don't think that's really a great solution because there already are enemies that can one-shot you. But when ragdolling and one-shotting was a much bigger problem, there were a ton of complaints about it, and everyone would be forced basically to wear light armor or Democracy Protects because, hey, you need a little bit of extra oomph. So there are strategies to get around the one shot as it is with the game, how it is built. And it would certainly make some enemies more annoying than other enemies, right? That would definitely increase the difficulty of the bots and definitely increase the difficulty of the Illuminate, but not necessarily the bugs because, well, they still have to get close to you. So it wouldn't be a good solution across the board, and I definitely think that people would not like a one shot and you're instantly dead mode. It would be more difficult for certain, but I don't think that that's exactly what people are looking for. They could also decrease the map size. Now, I don't know how this would impact performance, but if you had a full level 10 super Helldive crammed on half the size of the map and everything was packed much closer, it would definitely be much more difficult because there would not be as much room to run around, there would be much more call-in problems, and there would be problems with like bases overlapping and defending each other, so I do think a smaller map size could definitely be the solution. Like a very common strategy right now when attacking a fortress is you take a pot shot at it so they do a call-in, and then you throw a 380 barrage at it, and then you just run away, let it clear it down. However, if when you ran away, you ran right into a detector tower or another defended position, it'd be much harder to sneak in, throw the auto barrage, and then run away. I also think its potential for having the map smaller would increase performance, which might give them the ability to cram a few more units in there because the map doesn't have to load nearly as much. Now, I'm not a technical expert, I'm not a video game programmer, so I don't actually know if that's true or not, but in theory, I think it works, but I could be totally wrong on that. And we've been talking for about 10 minutes here about different difficulty solutions, and every single one of them has their flaws with it. But like I said earlier, just because something's not a perfect solution doesn't mean we shouldn't try it. At a certain point, they do need to add another difficulty. The people want it, and whether or not it's going to be perfect, well, perfect is the enemy of good, right? We're not going to get it done if we're waiting for an absolutely perfect solution, because I just don't think there exists a perfect solution. Now, of course, someone in the comments will probably prove me wrong, so if you have a perfect solution, put it down in the comments down below and I'll gladly say that I'm wrong and eat some humble pie. I just don't think there exists one perfect, one-size-fits-all solution. They could just add a difficulty 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and keep doing as they've done, but again, as we've seen, people adjusted level 10s and people can complete them without a single death as I did in this run. So I'm not sure that adding another difficulty will be a long-term solution either. But overall, after everything we've said, I think the most effective solution would be either decreasing the time and requiring samples, or decreasing the map size and making everything much more packed together and much more chaotic. Thank you for listening to me ramble for 10 minutes. I always appreciate it. And as always, go and have a blessed day.